Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of Dynasty Lessons Learned, where I'm taking a look back at the entire Week 5 slate of NFL games and breaking down every single game, every single team, and every meaningful player production from a Dynasty fantasy football landscape and from a scope of Dynasty. So we can just get right into it. It's a very fun week, honestly. There's a lot of really, really good performances, some not so great performances, but overall, I thought this was a pretty positive week. A lot of very high-scoring affairs from fantasy football, standpoint. So we can dive into this Thursday night football game that was very surprising to me. That the fact that the San Francisco 49ers won. They are one of a handful of 4-1 teams. The other one is going to be the team that we're going to get to at the very end of this, that won on Monday night, that they're somehow 4-1 as well. But hey, that's football, So we can start with the San Francisco 49ers side of the ball because it's a little bit easier. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey was phenomenal, 8 for 82 and a touchdown through the air, had 57 rushing yards. That's Christian McCaffrey. Jake Tonges just continues to be a good tight end fill-in, essentially, until George Kittle were to come back. It's really unfortunate because we've seen all this pretty good production from Tonges, and then it could have just been all going to George Kittle anyway, but it is what it is. Kittle, I don't know if he's going to be back this week. I saw a report saying that he might not be back until week 7. So if you still have Tonges, then you might have another week of him. Or if you are waiting on George Kittle, you might have to wait one more week. Mac Jones was really, really good. 340 yards and 2 touchdowns. So if he's continuing to start over Brock Purdy, then I feel like he's a pretty okay QB2 play in Superflex leagues. Kendrick Bourne was the wide receiver 1 without Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings active. Some people wondered if it would be Demarcus Robinson. Some people went towards Kendrick Bourne. It ended up being pretty much almost entirely Kendrick Bourne, 10 for 142. You can't really do anything about that, though. I mean, he's a fine waiver wire pickup. But outside of that, there's really nothing else going on with the Niners offense. It's just there's so many injuries that Christian McCaffrey is so great. We're waiting for George Kittle to come back. We're waiting for Pearsall and Juwan Jennings to really get healthy, both of them to get healthy. We're waiting for Brandon Ayuk to come back. So it's just kind of we're still going throughout, every single week, just with the same kind of guys of not trusting anybody else outside of Christian McCaffrey, and yet they're 4-1. So good for them. On the Rams side of the ball, very similar story. The guys are the guys. Matthew Stafford was really, really great for fantasy football, 389 and 3. Kyron Williams was great. He had 65 carries and then also had 8 for 66 and 2 through the air. So he kind of matched or actually beat out what Christian McCaffrey did, but kind of had a similar split in production between rushing and receiving. But Kyron Williams was phenomenal. Relegated Blake Corum to 1 total touch on the day on 3 opportunities. So I think, I've had the faith that this has been Kyron Williams' backfield, and I know that faith got a little bit shaken in week 4 because they were kind of more 50-50 split, but then Corum had that fumble, and then Kyron has now kind of gone back to being a 20-plus touch kind of a back. And I'm not buying Kyron Williams, but I still think that he's just a really solid hold in Dynasty. If you've had him, and especially if you're a contender, I would definitely just continue to ride out the production because he's in a great offense. He's the RB1. I'm not really concerned about Blake Corum right now. I really haven't been for most of the year. And this is just another game where, Kyron had 22 touches to Blake Corum's 1. So that's pretty much all you really need to know about that. Devontae Adams, great. Puka Nacua, great. That's pretty much it. That's the Rams and 49ers game because the guys are the guys, and Puka's phenomenal. I think he honestly is the Dynasty wide receiver 1. Devontae Adams is a great contender buy if you needed some production for a little bit of cheap because of his age. And then that's the LA Rams and 49ers. Looking at the London game then on Sunday morning, the Vikings and the Browns. On the Vikings side of the ball, it was kind of slow for most of the game, I would say. The Cleveland Browns have a phenomenal defense, and we knew this. Jordan Mason in redraft circles was a more popular kind of, if you could find a way to pivot off of him, if you picked up Rico Dowdle, you picked up Rashad White, or maybe you went with Michael Carter. There were options that you could have sat Jordan Mason, and I think for the most part that they were relatively good pivot options if you picked, there's more than enough pivot options if you're able to pick the right one. Not to say that he had a bad game, 50 yards and a touchdown, 3 catches, but only 4 yards on that. I think he did lose a fumble as well. So he had minus 2 yards or 2 points in fantasy points if you score fumbles. So he didn't have like a bad game, but it wasn't a great game. And if he didn't score that touchdown, it would have been an actually bad game. But he got it done because he found the end zone. So Jordan Mason just continues to be a very solid kind of RB2 with a better RB2 in really positive matchups. So, a startable kind of guy in lesser matchups like he was this week. And that's just kind of it. Xavier Scott, though, is an interesting kind of what do they do after this year? Do they let Aaron Jones? I don't even know if Aaron Jones is able to walk after this year. Sorry, the reason why I always look up stuff on my phone on here instead of the computer is because I'm streaming or like I'm casting my screen onto the thing, so I don't really want to mess it up. But Aaron Jones has a contract that he signed a 2-year deal. And it expires at the end of next year. So he has 1 more year left on his deal, Aaron Jones does. So I'd be curious just to see what would happen with that because Xavier Scott doesn't look all too bad. And he didn't have any catches this week, but he had a ton of catches last week that, he has that kind of Aaron Jones change of paceness with him, but he's a lot younger, obviously on a rookie deal, way cheaper. So I do wonder if there's like a little bit of longevity to Xavier Scott or if he's just a name that's popped up right now just because Aaron Jones is hurt. But in 2026, it would be Jones and Mason. And for the remainder of the year, it would be Jones and Mason whenever Jones comes back. That's just something that could be of interest that I think about. I wonder if there is longevity with Xavier Scott. But at the current moment, nothing really more than just a stash and a waiver wire ad if you want to pick him up if you have a bench spot. Justin Jefferson, phenomenal. He's been fantastic pretty much every single game with Carson Wentz. Wentz just only really looks at him, which is great. I mean, that's what I would do if I had Justin Jefferson. I would just only throw to him. So it definitely works. Jordan Addison, I think he sat the first quarter. Maybe it was just the first drive. He was kind of suspended a little bit because he missed a team run through. Kevin O'Connell said, so he didn't play this full entire game because of that, but had the game-winning touchdown and was still really good for fantasy. TJ Hawkinson actually had almost 10 PPR points, so there is that. I'm not in on TJ Hawkinson really from a dynasty standpoint anymore, and I do fear what happens to this offense passing-wise whenever JJ McCarthy comes back. I believe they're on a bye week this week, and I believe that they're going to try and see if they can get McCarthy back for week 7 to essentially give him 2 more weeks to heal through this bye week. So I'd be curious to see what happens to this passing offense because it was nowhere near as good or fantasy viable, especially really past Justin Jefferson. And even Jefferson himself wasn't really doing all that much for fantasy football with JJ McCarthy. But I mean, he is their franchise quarterback, or at least they want him to be. So it would make sense to throw him back out there. But from a fantasy standpoint, we almost got to hope that it's still Carson Wentz for a little bit because Wentz is delivering. He's willing to throw, and he's willing to throw a lot, especially to Justin Jefferson. But for Hawkinson, from a dynasty standpoint, I'm probably more on a sell than I am anything. I definitely would not be buying him. If you want to hold him, that's fine. But I think he's definitely more of a sell type of a player, especially with all these, really interesting up and coming kind of wide receivers or tight ends, I should say. One of which being Harold Fannin on the opposite side, who caught the touchdown, one of the 2 touchdowns from Dylan Gabriel, and had 4 receptions. David Njoku caught the other one. This was something that I didn't want to trust it, but I had it in the back of my head that hey, they might run a lot of 12 personnel, and David Njoku and Harold Fannin might be more of the safety blankets for Dylan Gabriel this week and be the guys that we can more look towards for production more than anything, especially without Cedric Tillman. And that's ultimately what kind of happened. It was David Njoku, it was Harold Fannin. Quinshon Judkins had another pretty big game with 110 total yards, 110 rushing yards, 18 receiving yards. Had a touchdown called back. It was like a 50-yard touchdown that was called back by a holding penalty by Harold Fannin very early in the game, so he could have had an even better performance had that 50-yard touchdown actually held. But this is going to be the Browns offense for a good while, and especially with the Joe Flacco news that he got traded. Dylan Gabriel is going to be the starter. I'm sure Shedeur Sanders is probably going to maybe have an opportunity at some point later in the year, but they're just trying to see what they can do with either one of these two rookies and evaluate both of them, which is smart because they're going to have an early draft pick in a class that is probably going to have a handful of quarterbacks worth taking in the top 10. So it's smart to see if either one of these two guys are going to be more of your franchise quarterback that you can rely on for the next few years and develop, or do you have to actually attack the quarterback position again in the 2026 class? So I would imagine Dylan Gabriel is going to see starter reps for the next handful of games, and then maybe we might see Shedeur as the season kind of comes to a close for the last 3, 4, 5 games or something like that. But as long as Dylan Gabriel's out there, I think David Njoku's a fine play. I think Harold Fannon's a fine play. I'm not buying David Njoku. I'm comfortable buying Harold Fannon for the future, but he's probably not a guy that you're buying to be like, yes, I'm excited to throw into my starting lineup at this point, even though I think he will have some pretty solid weeks. Judkins obviously remains a phenomenal buy, if you can even buy him. He's a top 10 dynasty running back, and I have no real concerns about him long term or with the being on the Browns offense or a lack of receiving work or anything like that. Quinshon Judkins is phenomenal. Just buy into Quinshon Judkins. Texans and Ravens then. The Texans side of the ball, they absolutely crushed them. The Baltimore Ravens defense is one of the defenses that we should be targeting actively, especially with wide receivers. But CJ Stroud threw for almost 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. I believe he was at the QB1 overall on the week, if not at least top 3. So he was phenomenal. Christian Kirk 4 for 60, Dalton Schultz 5 for 60, Nico 4 for 50 and a touchdown. Xavier Hutchinson caught 2 touchdowns and Jalen Knoll caught 1 touchdown. So there is a lot of, mouths to feed, quote unquote, here, but I think a lot of it is just due to kind of garbage time. The Texans got up really, really fast and then just kind of held the gas pedal down and just kept throwing and kept going. So I can't really take away too much from this. I don't think it was a really bad defense. It was a positive game script pretty much the entire time. I'd love to buy Nico Collins still. I think he's a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. The other guys, we just need to see a little bit more either target consolidation or target separation with Higgins, Noel, even Christian Kirk's, I think, solid. When we're getting into bye weeks and injuries, having to start Christian Kirk is not going to be the worst thing in the world, but I'm not going out and buying him. Dalton Schultz, I think, just had a good game because the Ravens defense sucks. But that's pretty much it. The only person I'm actively buying on the Texans right now is Nico Collins. I would love to sell CJ Stroud still. Nick Chubb, I would love to sell because I don't trust this at all. The Woody Marks thing was insane given the production that he had in week 4. And then he comes out and he is out-touched by Nick Chubb, does not get a lot of receiving work. So it's just kind of like, it is what it is. I wouldn't read too much into the Dameon Pierce usage. A lot of that was because of the final drive or two. Dameon Pierce came in when they were up by, 30 for the final couple of drives there. So I wouldn't read too much into the splits between Marks and Pierce. But the fact that Nick Chubb kind of came out and he was more of the leader, I think is slightly worrisome that maybe we crowned Marks too soon as the lead RB1 for the Texans, and it is going to be a little bit more of a 50-50 split, and that might lead to him being a little bit untrustworthy in your starting lineup. And it was already a guy that I wasn't trying to really buy into for the future. I was a little bit more concerned about his role in this offense long-term after 2025. So from a dynasty standpoint, I was already more on the sell train for him too. And we'll just have to see how the season goes on still. Maybe it's kind of more of a Nick Chubb in like a David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs thing, where it's if you can predict that Houston's going to do well against a bad team, maybe that is more of a Nick Chubb thing, kind of like how it would be a little bit more of a David Montgomery thing. But then in the games where they do need to throw to kind of keep up, they're down more, they're negative game scripts. That's more of a Woody Marks role. So maybe we can find predictiveness in which one is a better play on a weekly basis based on how we predict the game flow to go and the opponent that the Texans are playing. So maybe that's kind of where we have to go with Chubb versus Marks. On the Ravens side of the ball, I mean, there really just isn't much to say. I mean, Cooper Rush just is not good. He's a backup for a reason. He's not a good quarterback. The Texans defense is really good too. I don't want to take that away from them or from Cooper Rush's performance individually, that the Texans are a very good defense too. And they just stymied the crap out of Cooper Rush. I mean, Zay Flowers was okay. He had 5 for 70. That's fine. Mark Andrews didn't do anything. Derrick Henry found the end zone, so he at least saved your fantasy day on that. But I know a lot of people are going to be concerned about Derrick Henry, to where I think he might actually be a pretty solid buy for the remainder of the year, because Lamar's probably going to be back, not this week. They have a bye week in week 8 or weeks. Yes, 7. I think Lamar's going to be out this week in week 6, and then they have a bye week in week 7. I think Lamar will be back after that, to where, if they're kind of back to being a more explosive offense because they have Lamar Jackson, then I think Derrick Henry is going to be better. So I think a lot of people are really concerned about Henry's usage and production, but we kind of had that same thing last year at the beginning of the year. And I understand that, Henry's a year older and this offense, isn't clicking as well right now, but it could again in the future. So if you're a contender and you can get Derrick Henry for cheaper than a first round pick right now, I'm all about that, because I think that he's still going to be, at the very worst, I think like a top 25 fantasy running back on a weekly basis. But, at his absolute best, Derrick Henry can literally win you a week. And I don't think that upside is gone now, just because the Ravens as a team aren't as good as what they were last year. And we just need Lamar to come back after the bye week in 2 weeks here. And then hopefully their offense will kind of get going again. And Derrick Henry will be good. Because I don't think it's not a talent issue, or I don't think Derrick Henry's washed. I just think he's just a guy who's typically better in games that his team wins. And right now the Ravens are 1-4. So but I don't think they're going to be at the end of the year, like 5 and 12. I don't think that that's going to be what the Ravens are. I think that they might be closer to a more 500 team. Maybe it's 7-10, whatever it is, but they're going to win more games in the future, especially when Lamar comes back, and that'll be a good thing for Derrick Henry. Giants and Saints then. Jackson Dart had another, I would call it a pretty good day overall. 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 55 yards on the ground. Did throw 2 interceptions. One, I believe, was actually a pick 6. Or no, they weren't. It was Kool-Aid caught both of them. So the one I don't fully place on Jackson Dart. Kool-Aid made a phenomenal catch. The other one I kind of do, but so I'm not blaming him completely for 2 full interceptions. And he is still a rookie, but from a fantasy standpoint, you really can't be too mad if you're relying on Jackson Dart, especially for the rushing production that he's putting up. So I still think that he is a really, really good buy right now. He just played his second career game though, and he doesn't have his top wide receiver in Malik Neighbors. So there's obviously going to be some growing pains here. The New York Giants are not a good team, and they don't have tremendous weapons, but Dart's doing about everything he possibly can to keep them in contention. And I think that he is a phenomenal buy for the remainder of, or for the longevity from a dynasty standpoint for Jackson Dart as a top 16-ish, 17 dynasty quarterback, maybe. Maybe it's more like top 20 for sure, but he might be a little bit higher. I have to do a rankings update at the end of October, so we'll see where he ends up after a few more games too. Scadaboo continues to lead this backfield. Just didn't find the end zone, and but he had 6 catches for 45 yards. So from a fantasy perspective, you can't be mad about it when he's scoring 16 fantasy points in PPR formats and not scoring a touchdown, because his receiving workload is phenomenal. Daniel Bellinger ended up being the leader in receiving yards, which I do find surprising, but at the end of the day, I wonder if it is something that might be a little bit more prescriptive moving forward. I talked about it in the waiver wire video that he might just be more of a guy that, with Darius Slayton out, with Malik Neighbors out for the year, they might be running more 12 personnel. And Daniel Bellinger, who had moments a few years ago as a rookie, might be a sneaky kind of tight end start. Theo Johnson caught both of the touchdowns from Jackson Dart, and I do think that that's going to be more of Theo Johnson's role moving forward, is that he has more upside, obviously, as the potential number 2 or even potential number 1 option. It's him and Wan'Dale Robinson without Malik Neighbors for the remainder of the year, to where Theo can have a pretty good receiving reception number. Maybe the yards will get better. He's going to average more than 5.5 yards per reception, hopefully, in the future. But we have seen now 2 games with Jackson Dart. I believe he has 3 touchdowns, all of which came inside the 10, or at least the red zone. So he's a red zone threat. He's got receiving juice, I think, and a lot of targets coming his way potentially just because of the lack of weapons. So Theo Johnson might finally, I was saying this at the beginning of the year, that I needed something to change for Theo to continue to buy into him. And the change ended up just being going from Russell Wilson to Jackson Dart, which I think is a very good thing. Wan'Dale is, I think Wan'Dale's going to struggle because he's going to see more top cornerback coverage or more defensive coverage come his way. And he's never been a guy that has, averaged 9, 10, 11, 12 yards per reception outside of maybe a couple of games. He's always been a much more lower ADOT guy. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change with a rookie quarterback in there. So if you can sell off of Wan'Dale, I'm fine with it, just to try to see if you can get something better. But if you have to keep him and you just need him for bye weeks or injuries or whatnot, again, it's kind of like Christian Kirk. Like, he's not a bad play, but I do wonder if people gravitate more towards him because they think of him more as the wide receiver 1. And he had that huge game against Dallas a couple weeks ago. So there's more Wan'Dale hype out there maybe to where you could get a better deal for him, go from Wan'Dale to a second, then step ladder from that second over to a piece that you actually want that you wouldn't have been able to get with Wan'Dale. So you have to do a couple transactions to get to where you need to go. But that might be something that you could be interested in doing for Wan'Dale. On the Saints side of the ball, there's Rashid Shaheed caught the 87-yard touchdown. Chris Olave, PPRs his way to another double-digit performance. Alvin Kamara was just kind of okay. Juwan Johnson didn't really do anything. Taysom Hill was active for the first time this year, but didn't do anything either. And that's just pretty much the story of the New Orleans Saints. Kendre Miller is starting to take over the rushing workload. So there is that, but I also don't think that Kendre Miller is really a long-term option for Dynasty. Maybe he's more of the starter next year, especially if they trade away Alvin Kamara by the deadline this year or trade him away in the offseason next year. So there is that possibility that, like, I want to hold on to Kendre Miller, but I also think that the hype for him got a little bit too much last week. And then, he's a fine running back on a bad team. And this is year 3 for him. So he only has 1 more year on his rookie deal. And I don't know if the longevity is necessarily there to where he's another guy kind of like Wan'Dale that if you can move off of him because of a little bit of hype and excitement for him right now, move over to another piece and then move over to another piece that you actually want. I don't mind doing that with Kendre Miller either because I'm just not sure if he's really anything super special. But that's pretty much the New Orleans Saints. I mean, it's really hard to trust or play any of these guys right now. If you do, it pretty much has to be Chris Olave almost exclusively. Maybe Alvin Kamara too. Denver and Philly, the game that made a lot of people really sad when I was watching it at the sports bar that my friends and I go to every Sunday because we live in central Pennsylvania. There's a lot of Steelers and Eagles fans here. Steelers were on a bye, so there were a lot of Eagles fans for the 1:00 game. And a lot of them were very upset at how this game ultimately ended up. Bo Nix was pretty good, 240-1. A lot went to Cortland Sutton, who is great. He's definitely a contender buy if you need some production. Evan Ingram ended up catching the touchdown, which I find to be like good for him, but I'm not. I would be selling Evan Ingram off of this performance if you're able to. Troy Franklin had 5 targets, 3 for 35, kind of what it is. And then Marvin Mims had 5 targets, 2 for 10. J.K. Dobbins just continues to be a really good top 20 running back. Another guy that I think is a really good contender buy for the remainder of the year. If you can buy him for a second or a second plus or something like that. Cause I think he's been a top 20 or maybe even a top 15 running back all 5 weeks so far. And he just keeps getting it done. And RJ Harvey's just not there yet. I do think RJ Harvey's going to pick up more over the second half of the year. But Dobbins has given him legitimately zero excuse to stop giving him any touches in favor of RJ Harvey. And that's just kind of where we're at right now. It's kind of similar to Travion Henderson, who, we'll get to that. Ramondre has given them a lot of excuses to move on from him to Travion, but Dobbins is not. So you can't blame Dobbins as to why RJ Harvey is, not seeing any work, or you can't blame Sean Payton either, because Dobbins is actually producing really well. And I think that's going to continue so long as he continues to produce, essentially. So that's why I think that he's a good contender buy for less than a first round pick, like a second and a third, something like that. If you need some running back production and he's on more of a rebuilder, take a look at trying to buy J.K. Dobbins. Moving on to the Eagles side of the ball, they had to throw a lot, which should have been good for fantasy football. And honestly, it was if you had Devonta Smith. Saquon had a receiving touchdown, so he was fine from a receiving standpoint and for a fantasy standpoint because of that and the little bit of receiving workload that he got. A.J. Brown continues to see a lot of targets and continues to just not be able to do much with it. I believe he has seen 8 or more targets in 4 out of 5 games this year, which might surprise the crap out of you. It surprised the heck out of me that he has seen that many targets pretty much every single week this year and has really not done anything with it. Of course, everybody can point at the long touchdown that, had he continued to run through the play, he might have been able to catch it. Personally, I think that ball was just too far overthrown that even if he was playing through the route, I don't even know if he would have been able to catch it. But obviously the optics of that does not look great. And I saw earlier today the report saying that Hurts and Brown and Saquon all had a conversation, a really positive discussion about a lot of stuff. So we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. I do think that there is a little bit of a squeaky wheel narrative coming around with A.J. Brown, but it kind of has been like that for a couple of weeks now. And he's been seeing the targets, as I mentioned, but it's just something else I think needs to change there. I'm honestly getting to the point where I think A.J. Brown is just the guy that you need to get off of in Dynasty because this is turning into a very disastrous type of a season for his Dynasty value, and he's never going to be able to recover from it. So even if you've got to sell low off of him, in one of my leagues, I'm trying to pivot off of him, adding something substantial to him to move over to like a Tetairoa McMillan. If you can move to like a Rashee Rice, if you can move to maybe just move to like a Ricky Pearsall or somebody like that. Somebody that's more on the up and up. Or even if you just wanted the production, what do you got to do to move from A.J. Brown to Devontae Adams to Cortland Sutton to, any of those type of older veteran wide receivers that are actually producing. That's, I think, where we're at with A.J. Brown. It's kind of rough, but I mean, it just hasn't not been good. Same thing with Saquon Barkley though, too. Like it's great that he scored and he's been on a fantasy standpoint, he's been solid and slash good for most of the games so far this year, but he's coming into this week injured. And I'm worried that if something drastic were to happen or a major injury were to happen to Saquon Barkley, that's Tyreek Hill right there. That is just like you have enough value right now as a producer, but you're old. And if something were to happen like that, the value just completely gets taken out from under you. And that's why I think that Saquon Barkley, I think, is actually the biggest sell in all of Dynasty to me right now. A.J. Brown would be up there too, but Saquon Barkley, I think, is the number one sell that you should be actively trying to move off of. And if you can do that before the Thursday night game, or if you can do that at least before, next week, I would be all aboard moving off of Saquon Barkley right now. Cause I'm so scared for something to happen and you get Tyreek killed and now you're dead. You're stuck with a dead asset. On to a much more exciting game, the Cowboys and the New York Jets. On the Cowboys side of the ball, Dak Prescott is just absolutely insane. He's so good, man. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL, has been for the majority of his career, and nobody wants to give him any credit for it. He is phenomenal, and he's doing all this without CeeDee Lamb. So imagine what he's going to be able to do with CeeDee Lamb back in the lineup. The fact that Ryan Flanoy is seeing 6 for 114. Oh my gosh, man. Dak Prescott is incredible. One of the and he's been one of my biggest dynasty buys for like the past 2 years. So if you bought onto that advice, at least I hit on something there for you guys, hopefully. So he's been absolutely phenomenal. Javonte continues to kill it. 16 for 135 and 1 with that 60-yard run. That I think he got chased down on, or no, it was a 60-yard touchdown, I believe, or it was somewhere in there. I mean, he might have been tackled on the 1 or 2, and then he finished it off. But it was a pretty good run, and then also had 1 catch for a touchdown as well. So Javonte just continues to kill it, and again gives them no reason to move off of him for Jaden Blue or even for Phil Maffa whenever he comes back from IR, or when Miles Sanders comes back. It's just, this is Javonte Williams' backfield. I'm not buying in. I'm still not paying a first round pick for Javonte because I'm not buying in so much from a like longevity dynasty standpoint, but for the remainder of the year, Javonte is going to be a really, really good fantasy running back because he's in a fantastic offense. He looks good, and he's just getting it done, man. So if you want to buy Javonte Williams, I'm on board with it as long as you're not paying a straight up first round pick for it. George Pickens caught the long touchdown, so he saved his day from that. Jake Ferguson caught 2 touchdowns. All of a sudden, he's becoming a touchdown monster after all of that touchdown regression is catching up to him. So Jake Ferguson is also one of the best dynasty tight end buys I think that you can buy right now, because I don't think his value is up to where, it would be. You feel like you're spending a lot to go get him, but his production is definitely there, especially for the remainder of the year. And even when CeeDee Lamb comes back, Ferguson's still going to, I think, be a really, really good producer for fantasy football. Speaking of tight end producers, though, Mason Taylor, man, on the New York Jets side of the ball, 9 catches, 67 yards on 12 targets. This is the ascension for Mason Taylor. We are now seeing him fully involved as the number 2 option for the New York Jets that we had hoped he would actually end up getting into that role whenever he was drafted, because it was so obvious that he was obviously better than Josh Reynolds. He's better than Jeremy Rucker, better than Arian Smith and Alan Lazard and all these other guys, that he could very clearly be the number 2 option for Justin Fields this year. It just, would he actually be able to take over that role? How soon could he take over that role? And could Justin Fields be a good enough and competent enough quarterback to actually make him, that good for fantasy football? And just through straight volume, man, he's probably going to get there. I'm sure the he's going to catch a touchdown or 2 for the remainder of the year. But Mason Taylor, I think it's going to be really hard for me to keep him outside of the top 10 as we move throughout the remainder of the year from a tight end ranking standpoint. And I would not be shocked if Mason Taylor's a top 5 dynasty tight end by the end of the year. So that's kind of where we're at with Mason Taylor, that if you wanted to go out and buy a tight end, I think that option, the first guy that I'd be looking to see what I can do is buying Mason Taylor as he is on his ascension through his rookie season, because he looks the part, he's producing well, seeing a lot of volume because he's necessary, and I think he's going to be a really, really good fantasy tight end for years to come. Garrett Wilson continues to get it done. Obviously played the Cowboys, so everybody was super excited to play him. Breece Hall continues to get it done as well. Didn't find the end zone here, and also lost a fumble, but he's seeing all the carries, all of the receiving workload in the backfield, especially with Braylon Allen's injury. Breece Hall just becomes even more necessary. So, again, I don't know where he's going to be next year. I don't know if the Jets are going to sign him, or if he's going to, go sign somewhere else, or if they're going to trade him before the end of the year as like a trade and then extension kind of deal with somebody else. But for the time being, at least, it looks like Breece Hall is kind of trying to come back into his 2022-2023 form that we didn't have last year. And that's a great thing. I'm starting to buy back into Breece Hall. Like, I know a lot of people are like, would you pay a first for Travis Etienne? Would you pay a first for Javonte? I would rather just pay a first for Breece Hall. I still don't even really want to pay a first for Breece Hall. But of most of the guys that have kind of let us down in the past, but now ascending back up, I'm more willing to do it for Breece Hall. I think he would be more number 1 on that list, because he does look good and he's young enough, could be in a better situation next year in terms of being on a better team. So there is a lot of good things going on at Breece Hall, but as for right now, just continues to be a pretty good RB2 with RB1 upside for sure for the remainder of the year. And then Justin Fields is just, if you can sell Justin Fields for any first round pick, I will always sell Justin Fields for a first. But as long as you have him, especially when he got good matchups like against the Cowboys defense, which he didn't, he was awful for 75% of this game. And then all of a sudden, the last quarter, that's when he got pretty much all of it done. That's when the Andrew Beck touchdown happened. That's when the Garrett Wilson touchdown happened, all at the end of the game there. And so that's just the Justin Fields experiment. So that's why I don't want to be on board with it. But, if you have him and you're not able to sell him, he's scoring you, top 10 fantasy points right now at the quarterback position. So there's that. Vegas and Indy, there's really not much to talk about from the Vegas side of the ball. Geno Smith is hot garbage. He is not long for the NFL with the way that he is producing right now. And boy, did I get that one wrong, thinking that Geno is better than Sam Darnold and Geno could, reignite this Raiders offense and be great for Jakobi Meyers and Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. And it's just, he is awful. So Geno is definitely a guy that I think if you can get off of him, definitely try to for almost anything at this point in Superflex leagues. Ashton Genty, hello receiving workload. Thank goodness they're starting to use Ashton Genty, man, because it's just so painfully obvious that he's the best player on this team. 5 for 42 through the air, 14 carries for 67 yards. Like this is what you want. This is what you want for Ashton Genty to enter that upper echelon of fantasy football production, a la Bijan Robinson, a la Jonathan Taylor and other good like elite running backs at the top. Is that even when they're not scoring touchdowns, which they're going to be more difficult to come by because he is on a terrible team, even when he's not scoring touchdowns, he's going to give you a good performance. He had 16 fantasy points in PPR leagues right here. So that's exactly what you want without scoring a touchdown. Ashton Genty should be seeing this volume every single week. And if he doesn't, it's absolutely criminal from that offensive system and from the coaching staff if Genty's not getting this workload every single week, because he is by far the best player in that offense. Even defenses know it, and they still can't really do anything about it. And this is why you draft a guy 6th overall, to give him this type of a workload. That swing route, that wheel route on the side at the beginning of the game, oh my goodness, man. Ashton Genty is a weapon. And if you drafted him 101, you were starting to see the fruits of that happening right now. Now, whether or not you want to keep Ashton Genty because you drafted him 101, if your team is that bad, maybe you want to move Ashton Genty right now for, a more long-term wide receiver option, but he's incredible. Top 3 fantasy wide receiver for sure. Jakobi Meyers is, he's just falling aside because of Geno Smith. Albert O ended up being the starting tight end this week because Brock Bowers was inactive and Michael Mayer was out. So Albert O, apparently, maybe, I don't know. Ian Thomas had 3 for 20 as well. Trey Tucker is kind of coming into being a top 40-ish wide receiver, I think, in fantasy football. I don't know if I'm still actively buying him, but this team's bad, and Geno's gonna have to throw a lot, especially because he's constantly throwing picks. So they're gonna have to throw a lot to try to win games or just to try to stay in games. And that might be a good thing for Trey Tucker, especially without Brock Bowers for maybe another week or two, and see if we can get him kind of back to fully healthy form off of this knee injury that he had in week 1. Because it's obvious that Brock Bowers was playing through an injury, and that's why he wasn't producing. So for now, Trey Tucker might be a startable option, but I'm not paying for him, and I would be selling him for sure. Jakobi Meyers might be a guy that you want to try and see if you can pivot off of. Albert O off the waivers. Ashton Genty, phenomenal. Sell Geno for whatever you can get. There's the Vegas Raiders. Indy, I mean, Daniel Jones, really good to the point to where Anthony Richardson had to come in, and they basically stopped throwing after halftime. Like Tyler Warren had 4 for 40 and a touchdown through the first half. Like through the first 20, 25 minutes of this game, that's where Tyler Warren was at. Michael Pittman was doing well. He caught his touchdown early. Josh Downs was even doing well early. And then they just didn't need to throw anymore because Vegas is terrible and Jonathan Taylor's running the scoring touchdowns, and they're picking Geno off, and then they only have to, they have the ball on the 15-yard line, and then Jonathan Taylor scores a touchdown. Like they just didn't need to throw. They only legitimately played half of this game. And they were all still really good for fantasy football and could have been even better if the opponent was any better. But I mean, the Colts offense right now is just clicking on all cylinders. Daniel Jones is a good buy. Jonathan Taylor is a phenomenal buy. If you can move off as Saquon Barkley to move over to Jonathan Taylor, you're going to add to Saquon, but I would do that in a heartbeat. Michael Pittman's great. Tyler Warren is a top 3 fantasy tight end, and Josh Downs is playable if you need a guy. I had to start him in one league this week. I didn't feel confident about it, but he gave me 11 PPR points, so I can't be too mad. And that's pretty much where you're at with the Indianapolis Colts. It's really easy because all the guys are the guys, and they're all producing really, really well because this offense is clicking. Dolphins and Panthers. On the Dolphins side of the ball, Tua had a really good game, 256 and 3, even without Tyreek Hill. Obviously, without Tyreek, Jaylen Waddle had a major step up. Darren Waller, 5 for 80 and a touchdown. Devon Achane, 6 for 30 and a touchdown. So, I mean, I think the Dolphins offense is going to be really easy moving forward. It's going to be, I would love to sell Tua, but from a production standpoint, Jaylen Waddle is going to be really good. Darren Waller is going to be really good. Devon Achane is going to be really good. And that's pretty much it. Malik Washington had 4 catches for 0 yards. So I still find myself thinking that there's upside with Malik Washington, and maybe he'll have some games here and there, but it definitely seems like the winners from Tyreek Hill's injury are obviously Waddle in the wide receiver 1 role, Waller in that number 2 role, and then Achane in his, very still necessary out of the backfield and even lining up as a receiver during plays. Those are going to be the 3 primary beneficiaries. And like I said, Washington might have some games moving forward, but this Dolphins offense, I think, is going to be really, really easy moving forward. And I would be buying Waddle, and I'm if you need a tight end and you want to buy Darren Waller for the rest of the year, I'm fine with that too, for like a 2nd round pick. On the Panthers side of the ball, Bryce Young was pretty good, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Rico Dowdle had, obviously he was the storyline of the day, 200 yards and a touchdown, had 30-something fantasy points. So play your running backs against the Miami Dolphins is what I'm learning as well. I already knew that coming in. That's why I thought Rico Dowdle was a strong start. I didn't think he was a 200-yard strong start, but hey, man, and the Panthers get the Cowboys this week. So it's a revenge game for Rico against a terrible run defense. Oh my goodness. So congratulations if you have Rico Dowdle, and Chuba Hubbard's out again next week, because he's going to be really good. And I hope you played him this week. Xavier Legette caught the touchdown. Tetairoa McMillan sees 8 targets once again. He's one of 3 wide receivers this year to see 8+ targets in all 5 games. It's Puka, Garrett Wilson, Tetairoa McMillan. Puka and Garrett Wilson are top 5 fantasy wide receivers. Tetairoa McMillan is wide receiver 23 or 24. And he just hasn't scored a touchdown yet. That's the only issue with Tet McMillan, is that he has not scored a touchdown. But when those start to happen, and the more he gets used to, the NFL game speed, gets a rapport with Bryce Young, I think Tetairoa McMillan is set up for a massive, massive second half rookie season surge that we see every single year. I know, like, Emeka Egbuka is killing it right now and is phenomenal. But I mean, Tetairoa McMillan has all the signs right there to be doing what Emeka Egbuka is doing just over the second half of the season as a typical really good rookie season from a wide receiver. So the buy window is still open for Tetairoa McMillan, but it may not be open for all that much longer, especially, like I said, they play Dallas this week. So that might be kind of the coming out party for Tetairoa McMillan, that if you wanted to buy him, this week might be the final week to do it, because he could absolutely, like, if he had 8 for 100 and a touchdown this week, I would not be shocked. And the buy window for McMillan would be closed, and him being a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver would pretty much be solidified after that, especially, over the second half of the season. His schedule is phenomenal as well. So just buy Tetairoa McMillan, man, while you still can, because he is going to be so freaking good for the remainder of the year and for the rest of his NFL and fantasy football career. Speaking of Emeka Egbuka, I mean, 7 for 163 and 1. This game was so much fun, by the way. Man, I really wanted it to go into overtime. They should have played about 5 or 6 quarters, because it was so much fun. Emeka Egbuka is just so incredible. The touchdown pass that Baker threw to Egbuka, oh my gosh, man. If you didn't see it, you just need to find a clip of that highlight, because it was perfect. The accuracy that Baker delivered into that window to Ibuka's arms, and Egbuka caught it with the sun in his eyes at the back of the end zone. Oh my gosh. It's just so good. And Emeka Egbuka is so freaking good. Rachaad White found the end zone twice on the ground, so he was good from a fantasy standpoint. Sterling Shepard got the other touchdown. Auten got used a lot. Tez Johnson got some work this week. Godwin still coming back into form off the injury, so I'm still not expecting much from Chris Godwin, and I would not be selling him. Honestly, I lean more towards him being a buy, because I wonder if people see the production, but they don't think like, hey, he's coming back from injury. He's just not producing well, and why isn't he producing well? But I still think from 2026 on, when you give Godwin a full offseason to work with, and maybe Mike Evans isn't there next year, that I think Chris Godwin can be really good as the 1A, 1B with Egbuka, probably more like the 1B. I think Egbuka is the wide receiver 1 moving forward. He's so freaking good, man. That I lean by for Chris Godwin. Definitely a hold, and lean towards him being a buy more than a sell. As for Sean Tucker, like I know I had a couple people ask me like, hey, what do I do with Sean Tucker now? Personally, I expected him to not do anything. I expected this to be Rachaad White's backfield, just like it was last year. And that kind of ended up being the case. He did see 6 touches, so you can't be too mad about that. But I mean, if this Bucky injury is a little bit worse, and he's out for a couple more weeks, and then Rachaad White gets hurt, and then maybe we have a Sean Tucker week, like I'm willing to hold on to Sean Tucker still, just because I think that he is a good player, just not in a situation to where he can produce, because the 2 players ahead of him are better. But that could change. He could get traded, or he could walk in a year or 2, and he could find a different kind of a situation to where he can actually produce. So I'm not cutting Sean Tucker from my dynasty team. He's just, I think, a long-term stash with the possibility that maybe something happens to Rachaad White while Bucky's also out, and then Sean Tucker, is the RB1 for a week. But Baker Mayfield's phenomenal as well too. Continue to buy him. Sam Darnold also is pretty good. I think Sam Darnold might actually be fixed, or this Kubiak offense is just doing him a lot of favors. And I think Sam Darnold is a really good buy in Dynasty maybe he's a top 20 Dynasty quarterback as well. That I'd be willing to pay first for in Superflex. Kenneth Walker continues to be so much better than Zach Charbonnet, while Zach Charbonnet just continues to score touchdowns. So that kind of sucks. JSN is so good. Cooper Kupp got it done through PPR value. AJ Barner scored twice, also had 7 receptions. And Torrey Horton also scored 2, which I love to see. But AJ Barner, man, I threw him on the waiver wire video as a double check your waiver wires for him. Because he's starting to get redraft buzz as well. And in a dynasty landscape, depending on who your other tight ends are, like AJ Barner at this point has scored a handful of touchdowns. He seems to be the tight end 1 over Elijah Arroyo at this moment. And it kind of works. Like they don't really have the best number 2 option. Like JSN's going to get his, but Kupp has had some weeks where he kind of disappears. Torrey Horton hasn't taken over yet. And AJ Barner is just going to win because he's going to be out there more often than not. And so like you're going to have games like this, you're going to have bad games, but AJ Barner feels like he's at the top of the touchdown dependent guys. Or maybe even at the bottom of like, hey, I might be able to trust this guy every single week, because he's catching enough passes and he's scoring touchdowns, to where he could be a pretty interesting, like AJ Barner versus Mark Andrews right now. I think it's AJ Barner. From a starting standpoint, not so much dynasty. I don't know where he's valued dynasty wise, but if for start sit decisions, AJ Barner versus Mark Andrews, I think it's AJ Barner. AJ Barner versus either the Steelers guys, it's probably AJ Barner. AJ Barner versus Theo Johnson, it still might be AJ Barner. It's pretty close, but Barner's in a better offense with perhaps more touchdown and scoring opportunity. So that's kind of where we're at with AJ Barner. Brenton Strange just went on the IR. I just noticed that. But that would have been an interesting conversation as well of him versus some of these up and coming other tight ends that I think that he could just be a guy that you could throw into your lineup as a very serious tight end consideration. Tennessee and Arizona now. If you haven't listened to the Fantasy Footballers episode from Monday, you definitely need to, because they are Arizona Cardinals fans, and especially Andy Holloway. And it was the funniest thing I have ever listened to. It was so funny, man. And I knew it, like literally after this game ended, I texted my friend. I said, boy, I can't wait for that Fantasy Footballers episode. And they delivered. They did not hold back, and they gave us exactly what we wanted, because it was really, really funny. So Titans side of the ball, Cam Ward got his first win of his career, 265 yards, didn't throw a touchdown. But Tony Pollard found the end zone. Calvin Ridley, 5 for 131, so he had a massive game on everybody's benches. Still had a 50% reception percentage, catch percentage, but at least had that 50-yard play at the end of the game. And other outside of that too would have been like 4 for 80. So that still wasn't even a bad game for Calvin Ridley. That maybe we're starting to see. This is why I've had a few questions on the 4 for 4 side from redraft of like, should I be cutting Calvin Ridley? And I've been hesitant to say yes, because I remember last year it took Bo Nix 4 weeks before he finally started to produce. Bo Nix was awful for the first month of the year last year. And then something happened week 5, week 6, and he just started to click. And it's not to say that Cam Ward is going to do that, like he's going to have like a Bo Nix level of a rookie season, but Cam Ward can still be, starting to figure things out here. And that might be a good thing for Calvin Ridley. Like there's upside there to where if Cam Ward starts to put things together and figure it out on an NFL level, that he doesn't have anybody else to throw to except for Calvin Ridley, Like Alec had 2 for 18. He's been more the wide receiver one, but I just wonder if that's if they just had a little bit more of like a rapport or something. But, we've seen, as I mentioned with Tetairoa McMillan, like second half of the seasons for rookies can be a lot better than the first halves. And so if Cam Ward's going to have a much better second half, kind of like what we saw from Bo Nix last year too, not to say he's going to pace for like 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns for the remainder of the year, but figure it out and be good. That's probably going to carry Calvin Ridley with him for a little bit, for most of that. So like I'm if you sold Calvin Ridley already, I'm not upset about it. And I wouldn't be buying Calvin Ridley, but if you've had to hold on to him because you couldn't get anything, there might be greener pastures ahead for Calvin Ridley. And this might be an indication of that, as Cam Ward's confidence is spiking because they just had a come from behind win against Arizona, and he's starting to understand the NFL more. I'm just saying that things could happen over the next 8 to 10 weeks here to where Calvin Ridley is more trustworthy than not. Kind of like what we saw at the second half of last year too. Like Calvin Ridley was a much better wide receiver in the second half of last year than the first half. So maybe that happens for him again too, and we just had to get through the rocky road of Cam Ward's first few starts. That it's a possibility. But I think Cam Ward looks really good. And I would definitely still be considering to buy him as well. Another guy who could be in consideration for a top 20 dynasty quarterback right now. On the Cardinals side of the ball, I mean, I don't really know what to say. Like Trey McBride, fine. Michael Carter's the RB1, so he had 18 for 50 and a touchdown, then also had 5 receptions for 20 yards. So lots of volume. And Emari Demercado is definitely not going to see any more volume than what he already got from that drop touchdown. Bam Knight scored the other goal line touchdown. So this is Michael Carter's backfield for the next 3 to 5 weeks, I would say, with Trey Benson out. So there's that. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a touchdown. I'll say called back. He got tackled on the 1. They initially said it was a 44-yard touchdown. Then they said he got tackled on the 1, so it was a 43-yard catch. So it could have been better had that touchdown actually counted for Marv. But this Cardinals organization, man, I'll say organization. It's not even the team. It's the organization just needs to fire everybody. So it is what it is. I love seeing the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is kind of getting it. I think he's starting to hit his stride in the NFL, and his connection with Kyler is starting to work. Trey McBride is obviously going to be great. Michael Carter is going to be a starter, but that's pretty much it, man. I really, from a dynasty standpoint, I really can't say anything outside of that because I just don't trust the coaching staff, the team. I don't trust Kyler beyond supporting Marv and Trey McBride, and I don't even really trust Michael Carter. He had 23 touches. You have to start a running back who's going to see 20 touches, So that's just kind of where we are with Arizona. I'm just moving on. Washington and LA. Washington, Jaden Daniels is back from his little 2-week absence, 230 yards and a touchdown. Also had 40 rushing yards, so it was pretty solid for him. Deebo Samuel just continues to get the job done. He is that's another guy that if you wanted to trade off of AJ Brown for Deebo Samuel, as a contender, I don't think that that's a bad idea either. You might even get something on top of Deebo to do that, and because he's killing it. And even when Terry McLaurin comes back, I'm still not even concerned about it for Deebo Samuel because he's really, really good. But the big storyline obviously is welcome Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Finally he had a career high in snaps, which was still sub 50%, but he at least had a career high in snaps, career high in touches, yards, scored twice. So I'm hoping that this is Jakobi Meyers' breakout party, and that he can be really good moving forward as the RB1, right? Because prior to this, there was too much of a committee approach where like JCM would have 7 carries, Rodriguez has had 7, and Jeremy McNichols would have like 3 or 4, right? And there's too much of that for 3 or 4 weeks there that I was starting to really flounder on Jakobi Meyers. And I still, like, I'm not buying JCM, but if you had him, this is what you were hoping for to see out of him, and that he would take over as that main RB1 that he should have been able to do already by now. But now that he has, I think that's phenomenal for the remainder of the year. I still don't think he's really substantially anything more than just like a running back in the situation right now, to where I don't want to really invest in him from a dynasty standpoint for the long term. But I think for the remainder of the year, I like him more from like a redrafty 2025 season approach than I do dynasty. And he could be pretty good for the remainder of the year in this good Commanders offense. Obviously, he's, a very explosive type of a player. I would love to see more receiving work from him to really trust in it. But I mean, he's so explosive that he can make things happen, even on still kind of limited-ish. Like, he had 16 touches. That's not bad. That's pretty good. But for him, I would like to see him get more receiving work to where he's, or more rushing work to where he's getting more 18 touches on the regular, 20 touch upside, 23, 24 touch upside in certain games. And we might be getting to that point with JCM over the next handful of weeks. And this might just be the early indication of that. Or they go right back into flat out committee approach like the Texans did with Woody Marks. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but this is phenomenal for Jakobi Meyers. I'm still not buying into him, like actually sending assets to go buy him from a dynasty standpoint. And if you could sell him for even more than what you could last week, like sell him for a first, I would absolutely sell JCM for a first. But I think if you already had him, this is what you wanted, and this is what you're waiting for. So good job. Chargers side of the ball, boy, they have not been good because of all these offensive line injuries. Ever since, like they were good beforehand, but then once Joe Alt really went down 2 weeks ago, man, that they have just not been good. Herbert doesn't have enough time. And I mean, he's scrambling, and that's great. And from a fantasy standpoint, he was pretty good because he had, 106 yards and a touchdown, but the 60 rushing yards is phenomenal. So he was solid for fantasy, but he's just not able to have enough time to really deliver back there. And that's going to be a major problem for the remainder of the year for this Chargers offense. And especially now that Omarion Hampton is placed on IR, I don't know if we can trust either Hassan Haskins or Kamani Vidal. They're both waiver wire pickups just to see if something happens, but I don't know what we're going to do without Omarion Hampton for the next month. And you would like to think that would mean more throwing, but if they're not able to throw effectively because he doesn't have enough time back there because their O-line sucks, I mean, this is like Cincinnati, but with a better quarterback, essentially. So, like, I wouldn't stop playing Keenan Allen. I wouldn't stop playing Quentin Johnston. And Ladd McConkey found the end zone this week, which was great. As I had said last week, literally, Ladd McConkey is one of the biggest buys in Dynasty because he's still seeing the volume and he just hasn't scored. Imagine what would happen if you just continue to give him 7+ targets, as we did this week, and he puts up, 15 fantasy points. So, I'm still love to buy Ladd. I would still love to buy Quentin Johnston. Still not for a first, though. I'm still not there for him yet. Because I am starting to be concerned that this offense might not be as good because that offensive line just isn't good. So I'm a little bit worried for I'll say the short term of LA, and the short term might be the next few weeks without Omarion Hampton, but the short term might also mean for the remainder of 2025 because their offensive line is really bad, and then will require them to get healthy for 2026, and maybe Keenan Allen's not on the team, and then it is Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey. So obviously the long term of the LA Chargers is still very bright, but the short term over the next, I'll say, month to the end of the year, might be a little dicey. It's not going to stop me from playing Keenan or Quentin or playing Ladd if I needed to. But I fear that the ceilings of what we saw from them, those first 4 weeks might have been like peak Keenan Allen, peak Quentin Johnston for the entirety of 2025. And that's kind of a tough pill to swallow right now. But that's one of the things of the ebbs and flows of the NFL and fantasy football. And that's just kind of where we're at. We need to see more games. I don't want to overreact, but I'm worried. I'm a little worried. Detroit and Cincinnati. Detroit every single week is super easy. Jared Goff is pretty good. I mean, he's a really good NFL quarterback, and if you can pick your spots when to start him correctly for fantasy, he's really good. David Montgomery, I had thought that this was going to be a Monty week. Ended up being right. He threw for a touchdown, and then also rushed for 60 yards and a touchdown too. Jahmyr Gibbs had a receiving touchdown, so he was fine from a fantasy football standpoint. Still doesn't have the ceiling because Monty's there. Which was my concern with Jahmyr Gibbs coming into the year, that Monty caps his ceiling, and so far it's been right. But I mean, it's still Jahmyr Gibbs. He's absolutely phenomenal. Sam Laporta had a big day. Amon-Ra, 8 for 100. Jameson Williams continues to not do anything. Brock Wright scored a touchdown. Isaac Tesla scored a touchdown. So the Lions are really easy. The guys are the guys, and sell Jameson Williams. That's pretty much it. On the Bengals side of the ball, massive amounts of garbage time, but this is why you don't sit Jamar Chase 6 for 110 and 2, because you can always do that. T. Higgins even had a pretty good game, so if you had to feel like you had to start T. Higgins, you were rewarded this week, at least with a double-digit PPR performance because of that touchdown. Chase Brown, man, it's not good. I mean, he had 7 receptions, so he had double-digit fantasy day again, but man, it's just not good. And then, Yoshi Voss had 5 for 82, so whatever. Obviously, the big news for the Bengals is the fact that literally earlier today, like 2 hours before I hit record on this, they traded for Joe Flacco, and my entire Twitter timeline just exploded in excitement that the Bengals traded for Joe Flacco, and that's going to fix everything. And personally, I think Jake Browning's a better quarterback than Joe Flacco right now. I mean, what's the difference? Jake Browning is a gunslinger. He's willing to throw it. He's going to throw a lot of yards. He's going to throw decent amount of touchdowns because he can, and he's going to throw some picks. That's exactly what Joe Flacco's done, except Jake Browning at least has mobility in that backfield to where he had 31 rushing yards this week, probably all on scrambles. I looked up when the last time Joe Flacco rushed for 30 yards in a single game. He's only done it 4 times in his career, 3 of which were prior to 2011, and the last time he rushed for 30 yards in a game was in 2017. That is 8 years ago. So, if we're already concerned and we're just like, dude, Jake Browning can't do anything because that offensive line is awful and he can't, have enough time to throw, and so he's getting killed, which is killing Jamar Chase, it's killing T. Higgins. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to solve any of those issues because he has negative mobility to the point where if he even feels like he can be, sacked or that he's getting pressured, he's going to go down or he's just going to throw it away. That's what Joe Flacco's doing. I mean, Joe Flacco wasn't good for the Browns this year. He was not good for Jerry Jeudy. He was not good for Cedric Tillman. He was okay for Harold Fannin and David Njoku, but they were eating each other's. I don't understand the excitement for Joe Flacco for fixing the Cincinnati Bengals. If they had gone and traded for Jameis Winston, I'd be feeling differently, because Winston, I think, could still be a good enough NFL quarterback, and he would have actually been an upgrade over Jake Browning. But Joe Flacco is not, and I would be selling the absolute living crap out of T. Higgins because of this Joe Flacco news. Everybody's going to be super excited. Oh, this is fine. This is going to fix him. This is going to be great. I would sell T. Higgins instantly because of the Joe Flacco news to move over to a better wide receiver. Jamar Chase is different, obviously, because he's a top 3 dynasty wide receiver, and he's going to get Joe Burrow back next year, and he's going to have games like this with Browning or with Flacco for the remainder of the year. They're just going to be a little bit more sparse and not as consistently with as what he would have had with Joe Burrow. So selling Jamar Chase is a more difficult proposition because you got to have you got to pivot over to another good wide receiver. But with T. Higgins, I could name you 15 different wide receivers that I would trade T. Higgins for right now. And not even bat an eye from a dynasty standpoint. They're all going to be better producers for fantasy for the remainder of the year. So I think Jake Browning's better than Joe Flacco. I don't understand the news or the excitement for that. And yeah, that's where we're at with Cincy as well. It still sucks. Even with Joe Flacco, it's still going to suck. On to the Sunday night game. Boy, Drake May is a really, really good quarterback. He didn't throw any touchdowns this week, but that's what happens when you have a 2 rushing touchdowns for Ramondre Stevenson and a bunch of field goals. But Drake May is really, really good. And Stephon Diggs also seems like he's starting to be really, really good again. Obviously, there was the revenge game narrative. He's back in Buffalo. But this is 2 weeks in a row now that we've seen Diggs' target totals and yardage and all that stuff. I mean, we knew that there was going to be upside for whoever the wide receiver one was in New England. I wanted it personally to be Kyle Williams. After the first week of the season, we thought maybe it could be Kayshon Boutte. And a lot of the community, myself included, weren't looking really at Stephon Diggs. We wanted a shinier new toy. We fell for that old trap of, we just wanted it to be somebody else. And Stephon Diggs still, to our credit, slightly at the beginning of the year, was not as involved early on. But the snap counts have been rising. It seems like he's getting healthier and healthier, which we should have known coming off of the ACL injury, that he was going to only get healthier and healthier as the season goes on and get more accustomed with Drake May. And now we're starting to see that to the point to where I think Stephon Diggs is actually a really good contender buy. And I would be, if you want to pay a second round pick for him, I think that's all right. But I think he's going to be a very good producer for fantasy for the remainder of the year. Like, if you could find a way to move off of Keenan and move over to Stephon Diggs, I think that that's a pretty good way to look at it. Or if you had Calvin Ridley, or honestly, if you're competing and you really needed the points, like Chris Godwin for Stephon Diggs plus may not be too bad. I would need the plus would have to be something worth my while, more so than maybe just like a random third or something like that. But maybe that's something that you could work around. Mike Evans for Stephon Diggs plus might be something. So then you get, a healthy Diggs who's not currently on inactive or anything like that. And then who knows what Mike Evans is for the remainder of the year with the ascension of Emeka Egbuka with Chris Godwin back. Who knows if Evans is back next year? Whereas Diggs might be the wide receiver one for Drake May again next year, So like those are the moves that I'd be looking to see. How can I pivot off of these other older guys to move over to Stephon Diggs, or maybe some younger guys that have a little bit of upside? If Stephon Diggs is more of a rebuilder, then you could just do a typical rebuild versus compete type of a trade for him. So I like Diggs for the remainder of the year. The signs have all been there over the past 2 weeks, and we've seen it now that I'm willing to trust into it. As for the running back group, man, I mean, the Patriots just really like Ramondre Stevenson. Antonio Gibson tore his ACL, that was confirmed, and so Trayvon's going to get more work, but Ramondre's probably also going to get more work too. And it's just very clear that Mike Vrabel likes Ramondre Stevenson. So I'm not buying Ramondre, and I would still be buying TreVeyon Henderson, but it's just very clear that something needs to change, because you cannot keep playing TreVeyon Henderson expecting that to be the week that, the script flips, essentially. And I think the Patriots even have a late bye week. So even if you're counting on a post bye week narrative for TreVeyon Henderson, that might still even be a month and a half in the future. So TreVeyon, it's just, you're just waiting. You have to bench TreVeyon Henderson. You cannot start him. Even if you have one good game, there would have to be like multiple signals that have had changed for TreVeyon for me to be willing to throw him into my starting lineup. I still think he has the longevity, but this year might be more of a lost redshirt season than anything, which sucks given where they drafted him and his preseason performances and stuff. And it's very obvious that he's very good he's better than Ramondre Stevenson. That's obvious, but it's not obvious to Mike Vrabel. So we can't do anything about it because we're not in charge of making those decisions. So we just have to live with it. On the Buffalo side of the ball, Josh Allen is great. James Cook this might have been the worst game that he had all year. which still had 15. He just had 15 carries for 50 yards. It is what it is. Khalil Shakir, solid. Keelan Coleman caught a touchdown, so he was probably under bench. Curtis Samuel caught the other touchdown. That play design for Curtis Samuel was really sweet. Dalton Kincaid, 6 for 108. His first 100-yard game of his career. He's been really good for the start of this season. He's still not even playing a ton of snaps. That I do wonder if Dalton Kincaid is starting to come into what we wanted him to be at the tight end position. And it just, he got injured before he was a rookie, then he got hurt. And then, so now he's in, I think this is year 3 for Dalton Kincaid. So it could still definitely happen. And if he's becoming more of a trustworthy option for Josh Allen, that is the upside that we saw with him when he was drafted there a couple years ago in the first round. And it just might have taken a couple years to get there, more of the third year wide receiver breakout, or I believe for tight ends, it's like a 4th year breakout for tight ends is also a thing. So we might just be starting to see that now with Dalton Kincaid, to where I'm not like, ooh, I want to go buy Dalton Kincaid, but my meter on him is probably like a solid hold. I'm not selling him, not buying him either, but I could see myself tilting towards a buy. Maybe I'm at like a 5.5. Like if 1 is like a massive sell, 10's a massive buy, I'm probably at like a 5.5 right now for Dalton Kincaid. Like, yes, he's a player that I would like to have on my roster, and a player that if he was not thrown into a deal, but like if he was a part of a deal for me to buy him, I would not be upset about that. And I wouldn't be like trying to switch him out for somebody else who I thought was better. I think Kincaid can be a really good player. I just feel like I've seen too much of a sample size of the last 2 years to where like 2-3 games of this year hasn't necessarily changed. It isn't big enough of a sample size for me to significantly change my mind yet. But we're getting there for sure with the way that he's starting to look. So very encouraging that Dalton Kincaid might be turning into the tight end that we all thought he might be. Then finally, Chiefs and Jaguars. On the Chiefs side of the ball, Patrick Mahomes just continues to scramble so much. He's a really good quarterback. This we knew, but he is scrambling at a very high rate. I believe coming into this season, he was only averaging like 20 or less than 20 rushing yards per game. And then this year he's averaging like 40 rushing yards per game. He had 60 last night. So holy crap, man. Kareem Hunt got both of the goal line touchdowns. So that kind of hurt Isaiah Pacheco. And then also had that 30-yard carry. But outside of that 30-yard carry, he didn't really do much because he had the red zone carries, the goal line carries. Travis Kelce was really good this week. So, you're never benching Travis Kelce, or you never feel like you should bench Travis Kelce. I'm not buying him. I would love to sell him. But it's still Travis Kelce at the end of the day. And he's going to have games like this, just not as consistently as what he had, obviously, for the majority of his career. Xavier Worthy got through PPR work, obviously had 9 targets. Hollywood was okay. I'm still expecting a lot whenever Rashee Rice comes back. So I'm thinking a lot of this, the Hollywood Brown usage is going to be more Rashee Rice. Rice might even steal a little bit from Kelce and Worthy. 1 week left. Obviously, after this next week, then Rashee Rice will be eligible to come back. So I'm very, very excited for that. Brashard Smith looked really good Monday night. So I definitely, if he's a guy that you could sneak into a trade to buy for the upside of what the second half of the season could be like, it's very clear that he has more juice than the other 2 running backs, and that he's just a different type of a player than the other 2 running backs. Not saying that it's ever going to lead to him being like the RB1 for the team, but it's just very obvious that he's deserving of the touches that he is getting already, and is probably deserving of even more touches moving forward, especially because they're still committing out Hunt and Pacheco. And, even Brashard Smith and Isaiah Pacheco both had 3 receptions here. Kareem Hunt had 1. So it's definitely a committee between the 2 main guys. But I think as the season goes along, it's just Brashard Smith's going to eat into both of their workloads a little bit more. And he should, because he's just different than the other 2. And that was part of the reason why I was advocating for why you should draft him in your rookie drafts or pick him up after the fact if you want to draft it, because he's just a different type of player. And that's a good different. And the Chiefs, I think, definitely need players like Brashard Smith playing well and seeing volume to I mean, they're 2-3 as well. So they definitely need to start winning games. And the fact that they're throwing a lot more, I think is a fantastic indication of what the remainder of the year could look like for the Chiefs this year. Because they're not running at the clip that they were the past couple of years, and they're letting Mahomes throw. And that is phenomenal for most everybody involved on this Chiefs offense. Jacksonville, though, I mean, what can I say? Like, Trevor Lawrence had 2 rushing touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown that he tripped on. It was the most Trevor Lawrence play I've ever seen in my life. But I mean, he got it done for Jacksonville to win the game. They're 4-1. They're tied with Indianapolis at the top of the AFC South, and it's them. Jacksonville, Indy, and Buffalo are the top 3 teams record-wise in the AFC right now. So, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is so bad yet so good at a lot of different times. It's like watching Drew Aller all over again. That it's just like he's getting the job done well enough. Their defense is good enough. They had a pick 6 in this game, so I mean, you can't deny that Jacksonville is playing well as a unit. It's just not working for really any of the individual players. I would love to sell Trevor Lawrence. I don't think he's just not a player that I want in Dynasty. I think that he has too much value for me to be able to move off of him for somebody that I actually want, because I just don't want the Trevor Lawrence experience on my roster or my starting lineup. ETN had, obviously he's still the RB1. I didn't love that Bashal Tutin came in for a lot of their more like red zone work. It seemed like ETN would get them down into the 20, and then Tutin would come in and get like a couple carries or like a target, and that was kind of annoying. But I mean, ETN is still the RB1 for Jacksonville, and it just didn't work out tonight or Monday night because the Chiefs defense and the rush defense can be really good too. BTJ and Travis Hunter both had phenomenal deep catches in this game. BTJ obviously had the deep catch to set him up for the game-winning touchdown. Travis Hunter's 40-yard catch was insane. It looked like Colorado Travis Hunter for sure. That they need to get them both into this offense even more. And the fact that BTJ had 4 for 80, I think is an encouraging sign for the remainder of the year. He's still a buy for Dynasty, as is Travis Hunter. But I just think, Parker Washington caught the touchdown. Diane Brown it is what it is. But this offense needs to flow through BTJ and Travis Hunter. And I think they know that, and I think they're starting to recognize that. But I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is the person that is going to be able to truly unlock that in either one of them, outside of them just being like good fantasy options, but not like the elite option that BTJ was or the elite option that we thought Travis Hunter could be. I mean, he still could be that, but I just don't know if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback that is going to unlock that for them with the way that this Jaguars offense is playing. So just kind of is what it is at this moment, So we have to see more. But that's going to wrap things up. Another long video. We didn't have 2 games because of bye week. So thank you. It felt like it was shorter this week, but it actually wasn't. It still went over 80 minutes. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in, listening to this every single week. I know that this video has a very core audience that loves to listen to it. So as long as you guys are still watching it and love to see it, I'll just continue making them. Even though I drink a lot of water after the fact, but it is what it is. But yeah, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Terrible at outros. I'll see you guys on Friday for the AMA at 12 p.m. Eastern time, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.